All right, guys. Well, thank you again so much for joining us for the Tennessee Achieves local update in Carter County. I'm always excited to talk about an Upper East Tennessee county. That's where my family resides, and so I'm awfully passionate about ensuring that students in the region have post-secondary opportunities, and I think Tennessee Achieves is doing just that. My name is Ben Sterling. I serve as the Senior Director of Content for Tennessee Achieves. I have been on staff here since June 2014, so I'm in my 7th year professionally. But I was also a student in the program when the program launched back in 2009, so I've seen it from its inception, from all the different perspectives that you can see it from. So I'm honored to be able to bring a presentation to you today, covering a variety of topics. I'm really going to cover 3 different things. We're going to start off with just a little bit of a background on Tennessee Achieves, who we are, what we do. I think we've done a really good job over the past couple of years of telling certain groups of people about certain parts of our program. But I don't know that we've always done a great job of telling a full story of what Tennessee Achieves does and all the different impacts that we're having. So we'll cover that briefly. To start off, in the middle of the program, we'll talk about Carter County specifically, some of the data, how are your students doing compared to the state and the state average. Then we'll wrap it up with some action items, ways that you guys can be involved in our work and continue the conversation about college and post-secondary in your community. So thank you so much for joining me, and we'll get this underway. Thank you for those that have introduced yourself in the chat. That's really helpful. I love Round Mountain. What a beautiful part of the state. All right, so again, like I said, Tennessee Achieves launched back in 2008, the class of 2009. In Knox County, we were called Knox Achieves at the time. We were launched as a workforce development initiative, and we have been growing ever since. So from 2009 to 2011, we just served in Knox County. In 2012, we expanded to 14 counties in East Tennessee. And then ever since then, we've added counties every year. Today, we're serving nearly every county in the state. As you can see on the map here, the green counties shaded are the ones that we serve. And since 2009, we've served over 440,000 students, and we've recruited over 71,000 volunteer mentors. Like I said, we're serving nearly the entire state, 90 counties. There's 95 in Tennessee, so we're in almost all of those. 74 of the counties that we serve are considered rural counties. 35 of those are considered at risk or distressed by the Department of Community and Economic Development. And I think our work is as pertinent in those 35 counties as it could be anywhere in the state. In those 90 counties, we're serving over 600 high schools. That includes all of the state's public high schools. It includes private schools, charter schools, and home schools. Below that, you'll see the colleges that we serve, 67 of those. That includes the 13 Tennessee community colleges in your area, Northeast State Community College. We also serve the state's 27 TCATs in Carter County. There's a main campus there, TCAT Elizabethton. And then we also serve a variety of 4-year public and private institutions throughout the state. It probably comes as no surprise to most people to see that most of our students enroll at a community college. In terms of the flexibility of schedule and how much it resembles a 4-year college program, it tends to be the most attractive option for students. We hear from our students that 75% of them plan to transfer to a 4-year college once they've finished at a community college. So it kind of is a natural step. Next step is to go to a community college, then to a 4-year institution. That TCAT number, though, is a number that continues to grow. When we launched Tennessee Promise back in 2015, this was 8%. So it's continued to increase, and I would argue that's because TCATs have continued to innovate and find ways to serve students and better serve them every year. So I would imagine that number would continue to grow as TCATs continue to be innovative in their work. Let's continue to talk about our reach a little bit. So in terms of serving 90 counties, what does that mean? We work with over 60,000 students annually, and that means that they're applying for the Tennessee Promise Scholarship. That equates to 89% of Tennessee's high school seniors. This is a number that for our staff, it's kind of hard to wrap our mind around, but almost 90% of Tennessee's high school seniors get an email from us. So it's a large share of the students in the state. When you look at the community colleges, 78% of first-time freshmen are Tennessee Achieves students. And then when they graduate, 86% of them are Tennessee Achieves students. So we have an impact across the board from the time that students are in their high school senior year to the time they're finishing up their programs at the state's community colleges. In the middle of this slide, you'll see some gray boxes. This is just some basic demographic information. This is not unique to Carter County. This is a statewide picture. 56% of our students are considered what you would say is low income. They're eligible for a federal financial aid. This is determined by the FAFSA when they complete that. So 56% of our students receive some federal assistance with their tuition. In the middle of this screen, you'll see that 40% of our students tell us that they're first generation college students. This number is kind of hard to put your finger on. This is, again, self-reported. And from what some of the work we've been doing this year is around first generation students. And we've learned that nearly everyone has a different definition for what first generation means. And I think that makes it hard for a student to determine whether or not they're a first generation college student. In my eyes, it's if you are the first person in your direct family, parents and your siblings. If you're the first person of those people to go to college, you're a first generation college student. That's a badge that I certainly wear proudly. And I hope that our students do too. And I always encourage them to when I find out they're first generation. But I would imagine this number maybe is a little higher than it says, because a lot of students think that if an aunt or an uncle or a cousin goes to college, then they're no longer first generation. But I would argue that they are if their parents didn't go, or a sibling. The last box here in this row highlights the number of students in our program that are majoring in a STEM related field. We were working with the National Science Board a couple of weeks ago, and we dug into this data. And I think it's really telling about our students that over half of them are in a STEM related program or discipline. This also includes any student that's enrolled in a TCAT and a technical training program on, again, as you can see here, health science related fields. I think this is really important in terms of the continued economic development of Tennessee. When you look at what industries are growing, it's these. It's science and engineering, and just manufacturing, healthcare. Those are the growing industries in the state. And it's kind of funny that this number is so high. We were at a lunch a couple of weeks ago in Chattanooga, and we had State Senator Bo Watson there, and he's a physician by trade. And he was talking to the students that were there and said, if you took a map of the United States and threw a dart at it and you hit a city, there's a healthcare job waiting for you there. And he's like, if you want a job, if you want to graduate from college and enter the workforce, major in healthcare and you'll have a job. And so he's like, I want you to stay in Tennessee, but I'm just telling you how prevalent the careers are at this point. So when I talk to students and they're looking for a place to land, that's kind of a no-brainer to study healthcare at this point. The bottom of this page, you'll see some general cost. This is sometimes interesting to folks that $32 million is the annual cost for the Tennessee Promise Scholarship. That shakes out to be about $1,000 per Tennessee Promise award given. And then the Tennessee Achieves annual operating cost is $2.5 million. This is used for things like salaries, facilities for our team, technology, travel expenses, the basic programmatic things, not scholarship dollars. So let's talk about what Tennessee Achieves does. At the end of the day, we are the partnering organization to the Tennessee Promise Scholarship in 90 counties. So Tennessee Promise serves as the backbone for our work. It's what brings the 60,000 students to us annually. If you're unfamiliar with the scholarship, as you can see here on your screen, it is a scholarship that allows you to attend community and technical colleges tuition free. Obviously, that's attractive to parents and students, so they apply to the scholarship. Once they get into our program, though, we provide them with a wraparound suite of services. The first one of those that they're going to come into contact with is our volunteer mentor program that we'll actually talk quite a bit about in just a minute. And some of you probably already are mentors, but it's essentially what I think is the reason why we've been successful for all of these years is because we have essentially an army of folks in local communities that are invested in students' lives and ensuring that they are aware of post-secondary opportunities. Students are going to complete and submit 8 hours of community service every semester. This is an important part of our program. It's been a tenet of Tennessee Achieves since we launched in 2008. And it's something that over the years, we've realized how important I think it actually is for students once they enter the workforce. We've surveyed our students that submitted community service hours this time around. And the survey resulted in 96% of students saying they were glad that they did the community service they did. And to me, what that says is that we're exposing students to community needs. And whenever they enter the workforce on down the road, hopefully in their memory bank is that need that they helped fill when they volunteered with Tennessee Promise, and they'll continue to do that into the future. So building an entire generation of community-minded people is sort of the goal of that. On the bottom side of this little graph here, you'll see the Summer Bridge and Summer Institute. Our summer programs are a place where we constantly are innovating, trying to find better ways to serve students. This year, we had 3 summer programs, actually. We had the standard Summer Bridge program, which is an in-person 3-week program for students who have below a 19 on their ACT. They take 3 classes, reading, English, and math, for those 3 weeks. And at the end of the program, they take an assessment in hopes of testing out of remediation or learning support classes that first semester of college. We had an online version of that this year, obviously kind of spurred on by the pandemic, but actually turned out to be a really great option for students like those in Carter County who there's not a main campus community college in the community. So that's where we host our in-person programs. So for those that have transportation challenges, maybe to get to the Blunkville campus of Nashville State, they can do the online program and get the same benefit. So we were able to actually serve more students geographically than we ever have with a summer program. And then the Summer Institute, it's like the Summer Bridge program, but it's kind of like times 1,000. It takes it a whole extra step further. It's a credit-bearing program that actually the students that complete that program successfully have earned college credit hours, so they start college in the fall ahead, and they also eliminate the need for remediation. And this year, 29 students had a 100% success rate in the Summer Institute program, which was hosted in Memphis. So we posted those 3 years in a row, in Memphis, and we've attempted to scale that in other parts of the state. But historically, that program was a 10-week program. So finding students to commit to 10 weeks over the summer while also having a form of reliable transportation for 10 weeks is somewhat of a challenge. We've scaled that back to 6 weeks, also kind of spurred on by the pandemic, saw the same number of the same level of success with the 6-week program. So I'd imagine that we're going to keep that way, and it may be easier to market in other places in the state because of that. So looking forward to next summer and see what we can do with our summer programs. And then finally on this page is Complete. It's our coaching model that we launched with the class of 2019. And really this is aimed at students from a lower income background. When we've done our analysis of student success, the most telling indicator of student success and whether or not they're going to be successful in college is family income. Students from a lower income background tend to be the most likely to not persist through college. So we identified that, and we created Complete, our coaching model, where we pair a staff person, a tnAchieves staff person, with a group of Tennessee Promise students from each community college service area. And it's somewhere between 250 and 350 students. And their goal is to connect with those students monthly. They have a percentage, the coach on our staff has a percentage they got to reach every month of reaching those students. And really the idea and the end goal of Complete is to build an extra layer of accountability for students as they make their way through college, so that when they run into a roadblock in between year 1 and year 2, there's somebody that's been consistently there the entire time since they started college that they can ask those questions to. In a lot of ways, I think Complete sort of carries a torch that the mentor lights while the student's still in high school and making that transition over the summer. And then the Complete coach sort of works in tandem with them through that first semester of college and then carries them on once the mentor program sort of wraps up for the student. I'm seeing a lot of success with that, and we're also continuing to innovate in that space as well. So let's talk about data. In terms of Carter County, we're going to, as you'll see on the next 2 slides, benchmarking against the state. On your screen now, you'll see FAFSA file rate and community service. Carter County's FAFSA file rate very close to the state average at 84%. I think this is a really high number. And for to me, what it says is that a traditional barrier, that is the FAFSA in Tennessee, isn't so much of a barrier. We've done a really good job of making the FAFSA simplifying the FAFSA, providing resources around FAFSA, and making that process easier. For those that are unfamiliar, the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It's the application that students complete for all federal and state financial aid in Tennessee. And we look at this as sort of the first step in terms of going to college. You got a student that completes the Tennessee Promise application, which most students do, as you can see, with 60,000 of them doing it, and it's a 5-minute application. The FAFSA is a little more complex. So in our mind, a student that completes the FAFSA is taking a real active step in terms of future college enrollment. So we put a lot of resources and time into ensuring that students are aware of and completing the FAFSA. So seeing that we're there in Carter County right around the state average, that is good. Right-hand side of your screen, you'll see community service. Again, we talked about the community service requirement. Carter County students have completed over 25,000 hours of community service, many of those being done right there in the communities that they live in. So I always take this time to plug the idea and the fact that if you are a part of a community organization that utilizes volunteers, needs volunteers, let our team know. We can share that to Tennessee Promise students, and you can utilize their requirement to fulfill volunteer duties in your organization. So feel free to advertise to them, and we're happy to do that for you. Let's talk about progress, benchmarking again a little bit to the state. I'm going to break these numbers down for you, so stay with me just a little bit. The first row here, Tennessee Promise applicants, those are from the class of 2021, so last year's Tennessee Promise class. The two middle rows, enrolled, first-year retention rate, those are from the class of 2019. And then you've got three-year graduation rate at the bottom, that's from the class of 2017. And I think if you look at this data, you should be pleasantly surprised. Over 500 students applying to Tennessee Promise, 149 enrolled. To me, you're going to see a drop like that because you've got students that go to if you could call it this, out of network colleges. So students that go to ETSU or students that enroll at Milligan without Tennessee Promise. You're going to have that, Keene. You got a lot of four-year institutions in the region that students will enroll at that aren't included in this 149. But of the 149 that enrolled, your fall-to-fall retention rate locally was right on par with the state, which is good. And then your three-year graduation rate was significantly higher than the state. And I think that is something to really pat your back. Somebody needs a pat on the back for that. I mean, I think that's a great number. 10 percentage points above the state average is huge. I think it speaks a lot to having high quality post-secondary options in a relatively close circle to students in Carter County, whether they're going to TCAT in Elizabethton, which is a high quality institution that's right there in the community, or going to Northeast State Community College. They have some classes in Carter County, but the Bluntville campus isn't too far down the road. So having a lot of options local does result in a higher level of success for students, and I love to see that. Let's zoom out just a bit and talk about Tennessee Achieves as a whole, kind of statewide. Our students outperform their peers by 14 percentage points in fall-to-fall retention, and they're outperforming their peers in six-year graduation by 16 percentage points. And I think what this says to me is that supports matter. Supports and resources, wraparound services matter to student success. And so the students that participate in our program outperform their peers because of the supports. If you look on the right-hand side of this screen, you'll see how some of our supports are impacting that fall-to-fall retention. Summer program participants outpace their peers by 34 percentage points. Those students that are being coached and complete outpace their peers, or not percentage points, excuse me, are 23% more likely to retain. Same with the summer programs, 34% more likely to retain. And at the bottom of this graph, you'll see Knox Promise students are 42% more likely to retain fall-to-fall. Knox Promise that we haven't talked about is extremely similar to Complete, where students are being coached by Tennessee Achieves staff members. The major difference in Knox Promise and Complete is that students participating in Knox Promise have access to completion grants. This is also sometimes referred to as emergency funds, but essentially a student who encounters some sort of financial hardship, and that is in some way affecting their ability to succeed in college, we can help with that financial burden. We have money that can be used for that through the generosity of the Haslam Family Foundation. It is kind of exciting news this week, though. It's kind of ironic that we have this week of presentations happening at the same time as we launched statewide completion grants. We were able to work with the General Assembly and leverage some dollars to be able to provide completion grants for students all across the state. So coaches like Lakin, who's on here with me, they're receiving these completion grant requests as we speak to be able to support students in any sort of situation where they have these financial barriers. The only thing that we can't pay for are healthcare related costs. So outside of that, that can be vehicle transportation issues, whether that's just gas or repair on a vehicle. It can be things like housing assistance, childcare assistance, technology and books for school, groceries. One of the things that I'll say, and after we launched this in Knox Promise, we had the same effect But this week, just 2 days into launching this statewide, it's eye-opening to see the challenges that students are facing across our state. And really the inspiring part of it is to see, despite their circumstances, so many students still want to go to college. And it seems in a lot of ways, when you hear about their circumstances, it's like, how could you even consider college? But I'm so proud that you are, and that we're here and able to facilitate a program that's going to support them even when things are hard financially for them. We can help alleviate some of that burden. So really excited about that, and really excited to see how we can continue to grow the completion grant model even further into future cohorts, because I think it's something that really does model success. All right, so we've talked about a lot of really positive things, but one of the negative things that's come out on the other side of the pandemic is the decline in our state's college going rate. So college going rate is the number of high school seniors that enroll in college the fall following high school graduation. In Tennessee, with the class of 2020, during the first year of the pandemic, we had nearly a 5 percentage point drop in the state's college going rate. In Carter County, very close, similar number in terms of the decline in the college going rate. It kind of mimicked that of the state. I think one thing, if there's anything that we can say positive about that, is that it wasn't more significant than it was than the state. In some places, it was really significant, into the teens in terms of percentage point drop in their college going rate in their county. So Carter County just kind of staying steady with the state. Isn't too alarming, but I would say that any decline in college going rate in a community or our state is a call for kind of an all hands on deck situation to kind of stop that. We want to stop that from happening anymore so that we can get that needle moving back in the right direction. And I think there's no better way to involve yourself in improving our students in our state and in your county, their outlook on post-secondary options, than being a Tennessee Achieves mentor. So a lot of you are. I think most of you probably on this call are Tennessee Achieves mentors, and thank you so much for being involved in that, whether it was just for 1 year or for many years. We appreciate you for sticking with us, and through all of the changes over the last couple of years, continuing to just stay true to the fact that we're trying to help students at the end of the day. So to give you a little perspective on what it's going to be like to mentor in 2022, we're pretty excited about it. We're going to try to leverage kind of the best of both worlds. If you've mentored with us before 2019 and before, you'd know that we had some in-person meetings with students and mentors, which I think were really vital to the mentoring experience. In 2020, we had a program that was completely flipped upside down in a matter of days. So we had a virtual program that was pretty challenging, I would say. And then in 2021, we were able to launch in an online mentoring platform, Tennessee Achieves Connect, that allowed mentors to mentor virtually, but also had a lot of resources and abilities to connect with students that were new. So we're going to utilize Tennessee Achieves Connect into the future in 2022. So you'll have that resource, but we're also going to provide you with opportunities to meet with your students in person if you want to. So we're going to have what we're going to call Tennessee Achieves open houses, where we reserve space at a community college or TCAT campus in each county. And we'll reserve space on a specific day for a specific amount of time. So let's just say it's on March 25th from 2 to 6 p.m. And we have that space. Our team will be there. And then mentors can invite their students to meet them in this organized space to get to know one another early in their mentoring experience. Now, Tennessee Achieves isn't going to invite everybody to that. It's going to be up to the mentor to invite their students to come, but we're providing the platform, if you will, for students and mentors to come together. Now, if that date doesn't work for you, or if you just want to do this independently, you can do that. So if you wanted to meet somewhere at a coffee shop or restaurant and just meet with your students, that's also an option. The only thing we ask is that it's done in a public space and you don't put them in your car. Outside of that, the meeting in person is going to be something that we are going to allow and actually encourage, hopefully be able to encourage in spring 2022. So really excited about being able to provide this sort of hybrid mentoring model that I think provides everybody with the method of mentoring that suits them the best, if you will. In Carter County, we need to recruit almost 80 mentors, 79 mentors to serve the class of 2022 based on estimations. Again, most of you are already mentors. If you haven't returned for 2022, we would love to have you back. You don't have to do anything special to do that. Just let me know. You can say it in this chat on here. You can shoot me an email. You can anyway, you hop on here and just say, Ben, I want to be another mentor. I mentor another year, and I'll do it. I'll sign you up. So really easy to return. New people will apply at tnAchieves.org/mentors. Deadline to apply is December 3rd. So we do have some time. We're early on in that process, but we like to get recruiting early so that we can make sure we find the 9,000 people necessary by the end of the recruitment period. So let's talk about ways to engage. This is kind of where I wrap it up, and then I'll open the floor for questions and discussion. Ways to engage with our organization. I think the easiest and best way to do that is to become a mentor and stay a mentor with us. You're a stakeholder in this work as much as Lakin and I are as staff members on this team. Mentors hold an equal footing in terms of the importance to the work. So we would love to have you and keep you in that space. Outside of that, if you're already a mentor and you want to try to do more with us, one way you can connect us, one way you can help is to connect us with your community. So if you're a member of a community club, if your church group has an opportunity to have a speaker, if your employer has a chance to gather people and we can come speak to them as a group, our team is ready and available to come speak to your group virtually or in person. We can provide a 5-minute mentor program. We can provide a 1-hour mentor program, whatever your space looks like. I told the people in Granger County earlier today that if you have a group of people with ears, we'll come talk to them. So we're happy to have those discussions, and I think it's just of value to us for people to hear about the work that we're doing, because we want everyone to be aware of the good things happening in the community. And the last way I think you can really engage with us in this work is to tell a friend about Tennessee Promise. I know this kind of maybe sounds simple, but I would argue that it is a really valuable thing that you can do, particularly for a student who may or may not be completely aware of what Tennessee Promise is and they haven't completed that Tennessee Promise application. So if you know a parent of a senior, tell that parent, let them know, a grandparent of a senior or a senior themselves. Say, has this student completed their Tennessee Promise application? If the answer is no, pull your smartphone out, go to tnpromise.gov and make them do it right there. It takes 5 minutes. The reason I say that is because I've seen this with my own 2 eyes of a student that had no excuse to miss the Tennessee Promise application deadline. My brother did not apply to Tennessee Achieves. He missed the deadline, even though I gave him ample opportunities. I printed an application out and laid it in front of him. He didn't do it, missed the deadline. And now at 27 years old now, he is regretful that he had to pay for his community college out of his pocket because he didn't have free community college with Tennessee Achieves, now Tennessee Promise. So just because you think a student maybe already has all of it together, they might not. And one brief reminder might make the difference in them getting that application submitted. All right, so now I'm at the end of my program, and I am now going to open the floor. You can unmute yourself. Feel free to ask questions, provide feedback, whatever it looks like. Fire away.
Well, hi, this is Carol. Is there any way that we could coordinate with the complete coach? Because like I had a couple kids that you could just tell that they needed extra help to get going. And they would be perfect for complete, and maybe they were working with complete coach. I don't know. Is there a way for us to know that kind of information?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that we've considered that actually. But yes, definitely. If you want to shoot me their names, just send it to me in an email. I can confirm whether or not they're working with a complete coach. But then to your point, that kind of gets my wheels spinning a little bit in terms of what that might look like in terms of us connecting and letting mentors know of their students who's being coached by a Tennessee Achieves complete coach. That's a good point. It's something I'm definitely going to think about. But if you just in the meantime want to send me an email with those students' names, I can confirm whether or not they're paired with a coach at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Good question.
Well, this is Carol, since no one else is asking questions. Do you ever get any kind of feedback from the students about, whether they felt their mentor was helpful or not helpful, or, what might be more helpful for a mentor to do for them?
Good question. We don't receive a ton of feedback from students about mentors, but the feedback that we do receive is typically overwhelmingly positive. They're thankful for the person that engaged with them. And oftentimes it's even the students who the mentor doesn't even realize the effect that they're having because the student isn't all that communicative. But on the backside, when we talk to the student, they're like, I was so thankful for all those reminders that the mentor sent to me. If it wasn't for that, I would have never made it. So it's interesting. Yes, to your point, the feedback that we do receive is always positive. We very rarely hear anything negative from a student about their mentor. The only thing that I would say is that students who they'll say that sometimes their mentor will their communication slows down. And I think normally the mentor has slowed down in communication because the student isn't all that communicative. So I just always, when I hear that, I'm like, I always remind mentors, you never know who's reading your messages and how much of an impact it's having. So just keep it up, stay persistent.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Looks like Gwen is coming back for another year. Thank you.
Because that communication piece is such an issue. And I usually get, like the last time I ended up with 8 students. 2 of them were so on the ball. Actually 3 of them, but one was going to ETSU. So he, kind of aged out. The other 2 were really gung ho, but so good that I don't think they needed help. And the others were like crickets the whole time. Now I was using the Connect. And so I assumed when I typed things in, they were getting text and emails, I mean, double reminders. So that's, I'm assuming that's still going to be the best way, the easiest way for us to communicate as compared to the year before, when I would send an email and then text everybody to say, I sent an email.
Yeah. That's the beauty of Connect, is that it will borderline harass the student when you've reached out to them. It will continue to remind them that they have an unread message in their inbox.
Oh, it does. Oh, that's wonderful.
They'll get a text and an email from Connect to tell them that you're in there waiting. So that is a huge benefit. One of the challenges that we did have is that there were some students that never got into Connect to set it up. And so in that case, it was more challenging because they didn't get those reminders. But we have a method this year for this fall where we're going to basically require students to set up Connect as part of their process of completing their mandatory meeting. So it will be sort of forced on them before they're ever paired with a mentor.
Good. That'll be very helpful.
Yeah.
May I have a point of clarification on Connect then?
Yes,
if I used Connect, that goes to them as an email only, correct? If I send them something through Connect?
That's a good question. So when you message a student on Connect, it's staying in Connect. They'll get an email that's from Connect. It won't be from you. And it will say, Carol has sent you a message, and then it will give them a preview of the message that you sent in the email, but then they'll have to log into Connect to reply back. But that still, to me, is actually they can reply to that email. If they reply to that email, it comes back to you. But it really does kind of store everything in Connect in that messaging platform.
Because I personally found that students wanted to text. It was more immediate, and that I got more responses by texting than by using Connect.
Makes sense. I mean, most students to us, from what we know, is they prefer text messaging, but we hope to be able to move as the years progress and Connect becomes more of a normalized process, that they'll be more used to using that in terms of the way that they communicate. Last year being the first year, I think we did a pretty good job of rolling it out, but we were still new to it as well. So I think as we get better at Connect and get more familiar with it, it'll be even easier for us to sort of set the precedent early on that students should be using that to communicate with their mentor as opposed to other methods of communication. All right, guys. Well, I really appreciate you all for hopping on. Any other questions? Great crowd. This is the biggest one I've had yet. Most of these have been 3 or 4 folks. So, okay, Mary, sure. You can type that in there, or you can. Looks like you're unmuted, so you're welcome to either just say it or you can type it in. Either way, whatever's easiest for you. Oh, Oh, okay, Mary, that's a good question. I'll answer that just real quick. Mackenzie Caldwell, looks like she logged in on Jennifer's Zooms. No problem. But Mackenzie, thank you so much for mentoring, and you'll certainly get some information about mentor training soon. November usually is when we roll out that virtual training. Okay, so sounds like Mary has a student who is on a waiting list at TCAT, which is certainly can be frustrating for a student. I can certainly understand why that would be the case, and she would feel defeated. I definitely understand that. The good news about a waiting list at a TCAT is that it's oftentimes shorter than they think. So they'll tell a student it's going to be 6 months or a year for a seat to open up in that program. But typically, from 250 people ahead of her. Holy cow! What program is it? That's a cosmetology. Okay. Yeah, that's a whole lot of people for sure. So what I would encourage her to do is just stay committed. I would also encourage her to talk with the admissions counselor about other ways to be enrolled. If there's another program that might interest her, if it's not cosmetology, maybe she's interested in something else that she can work on while she's waiting. So you never know if it's going to be another program that'll spark her interest. I think a lot of times students that I talk to are really passionate about a certain program of study or a major at this point, and then that changes really quickly once they get into that program. So in a lot of ways, if I have a student who's on a really long waiting list at TCAT, and this is a little easier when it's not something as specific as cosmetology, but if you have a student who's like interested in welding and there's a really long welding waiting list, I can get them into HVAC or industrial maintenance that has a lot of the same characteristics. Cosmetology is pretty specific, but there might be something out there in terms of the healthcare industry that she might be interested in, that she could have those conversations with an admissions counselor. Certainly not something that I would expect her to always be interested in, but get her wheels turning. Maybe there's something out there that could alleviate that waiting list. There may be also another institution in the region that she could look at. It might require a little bit of a drive. The waiting lists are, I understand, it is a process that I would argue that all TCATs are trying to get to fix, but it's a facility challenge, just or straight up a room challenge. They don't have room for all of the interest, so they're trying to do everything they can. Yeah, I understand. Just stay strong. Whatever her name is, the student, I don't know her name, but stay strong.
This is Carol, and one of the things I found is if they want to go to a TCAT, I really push them, apply now. It may only be April, because they think they have till July, because that's what it says, and it's like there's limited space. If you want to get into that program, I start pushing them like, in April.
That's great
start
advice.
applying and stuff.
Definitely. That's great advice. I know that when I would encounter students in October when we would do our handbook drop-offs, and I'd talk to a student who would say he was interested in, if he was a diesel mechanics student or a welding student, I'm like, apply now, because those programs always have waiting lists. If you apply now, there's a chance that by August that space is opened up. So yeah, that's a great point, Carol. Good, something great for mentors to keep in mind for sure.
When's the earliest they can apply?
Anytime. So they can apply anytime.
Okay.
But they have to keep in mind that
they have to fill their other requirements at the same time.
Right. So they can't start until the earliest that a student can start at a TCAT is the summer after they graduate from high school. But they can go ahead and get that application in anytime.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It may not be completely finished until their high school transcript's sent, those types of things, but they can get their name on a list.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Well, I'm happy to stay on and answer questions for as long as you guys want to stay. This was my last meeting of the day, so I'm wide open. But if you don't have anything else, those of you that are on here, you can feel free to hop off. But I'll stick around and answer questions until the last person's gone.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
So I was thinking the student should really consider traditional school, and I tried to talk to her about going to Northeast, and I get the feeling that she doesn't really see herself as an academic type.
Okay.
But she was thinking of studying psychology, which, I'm not sure a degree in psychology, a bachelor's in psychology is really your ticket to a whole lot, except maybe more studies of psychology. So, but she's a single mom, and my heart breaks for her. She's the most motivated student I've ever had. The only thing is, like Carol said, she never took the time to pounce on the application process. So, and that's something you wouldn't know if your parent didn't, no one's helping her but me. And I'm just so sorry about this. But what's really pathetic is that they sent her a letter congratulating her on being, getting into school. And so they messed that up. And so I thought, well, I'll call over there, even though I know FERPA protects her information. I can't really talk to them. I couldn't even get through.
Right.
So it sounded chaotic at best. And I thought maybe she actually did get in. But why are they sending her a letter welcoming her? So so these poor students, I mean, they're seeing some of the worst. Maybe she's the only one, but it just seemed like a very disappointing way to handle it. And I don't know how I can help her. She wants to now go to a private cosmetology school, and I said, I don't think Tennessee Promise money goes to Jenny Lee.
That's right. Yeah, and it's pretty expensive. If I'm in your shoes, I would have a conversation with her. As you said, she's a single mom, and I know that oftentimes students aren't really aware of how much money different jobs pay. Right. I think that's one of the things that I didn't know that when I was in college. I just am learning this now that I do this kind of work. But normally when I talk to a student, I start to explain to them how lucrative and flexible in career in healthcare can be. A lot of times their ears will perk up. I think they think of it as just being really hard, and it is, don't get me wrong. But the schedules are oftentimes really flexible, and the pay is just out of this world. And there's jobs all over the region in Northeast Tennessee. They need nurses yesterday. So
yeah, there's so many who are resigning from nursing, so there are openings. Yeah,
if she is interested even in the least amount in that, I'd say that they can get her in. I don't know this. I don't know their waiting list times at all. But to me, it would be, if there's 250 people ahead of her in cosmetology, there may be less in another program. So it's worth the research, at least in my opinion, for her to go take a look at it and see what she can find herself doing, because oftentimes what she can do is get in there and get started in like an LPN program. She can get her CRN licensure and get to work pretty much within 6 months or less. And so then she can work and go to school at the same time and be earning those credentials and work her way up in that industry. So to me, that's from what you've told me about her circumstances, that might be something she could be interested in.
That's a good point. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, they lock in on a certain job, and they just get tunnel vision on wanting to do that one thing, and they don't even really always know. I think it's they make a lot of assumptions about what that career is going to be, and while it's incredibly, it's a fulfilling career for thousands of people, and it's a great career. But if she can't get to work soon, to me, I just am concerned that she's not going to go. She's going to lose interest.
Right.
And I don't
and
want
so this is another issue of how she remains eligible. Does she have to keep doing service hours every year?
No. So once you're on a waiting list, you sort of just pause. You pause Tennessee Promise. And so she doesn't do community service hours again until she starts. So say she doesn't enroll at all this fall and she starts in January, her next community service deadline is April 1st.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. So all she has to do is stay in Tennessee. If she leaves the state.
Yeah, she has to be a Tennessee resident to be eligible for Tennessee Promise. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. I've run into this problem a lot. I understand, but I think there's a lot of times there's hope that can be found if you just have those really in-depth conversations about career paths and say, hey, there are other options. Let's talk about them. I know you might not even want to right now, but let's do it. Let's just talk about it.
Yeah, and their goals are not very realistic, and that's always the case with someone who's at her age. But oh, you know, I don't know what to say. She thinks she would pass out being in healthcare. It would upset her to see suffering or whatever. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I understand. I probably
Mary,
would.
wonder if you make a connection for her, how if she was, an LPN or a CRN or whatever, she could help people look better. They get really depressed lying in those beds with their hair kind of a mess. And she could actually really help them raise her spirits. If she would,
yeah.
maybe she could combine her health and maybe just a little bit help a patient feel a little
Yeah, no,
better
I
because
like
she
that.
looks a
I
little
like
better.
that.
Me
And she
too.
wanted to go into psych because she thought she could help people. And being a cosmetologist, you listen to people's problems, right? So yeah, you could do that as an LPN. I mean, her alternate thought was to go into art, and I thought, oh my goodness, that psychology looked like an awesome degree. So, I've got a niece who went to one of the finest schools in America to become an art therapist, and she is looking down the barrel of poverty, debt and poverty. So there's some really romantic things that they want to do, and then there's things you do so you can actually eat, and pulling those together has been a challenge.
It is. And it's not unique to just those two. It's such a common thing. And it's something that even in the last couple of months, I've really started to think about how we better inform students while they're in high school about careers and what is the path to that career. Because I just think and I was like I said, I'm a first generation college student. So I didn't have these conversations at home at all. I didn't talk about college until July before the August enrollment. So it was like, I am our student, right?
Yeah, but you're a guy.
So it's
Sorry.
It's just interesting to me. I think there has to be an even better way of having these conversations with students when they're younger about connecting those dots. We do these webinars with people all the time who work in big corporations, right? Discovery Channel in Knoxville employs thousands of people. But everybody, if you ask a high school student, what's someone that works at Discovery do? They'll say, oh, they're on TV. Well, no, right? Well, 1% of that staff is on TV, right? But then they also have creative people. They have accountants. They have people that mop the floor. They have people that work on computers. They have HR professionals. They have people that recruit, right? So it's trying to better inform our high school students about those things so that when they start college and they're in these shoes that your students in, they at least have a better understanding of the different options that are out there, not just this one thing that they've always been focused
on. All right. Well, send good thoughts my way.
Yeah,
I think I have to meet with her.
You're doing great. I appreciate you for connecting with her and helping her, because without mentors, this is like exactly why the mentor program is important, in my opinion. Because if you're not helping her and you said no one else is, then those students just flounder, right? Because then they don't know what to do. They're just frustrated, and oftentimes, unfortunately, the result is they give up, and we don't want that to happen. So mentors often stand in the way of that.